When you think of managers who have earned the right and distinction of managing a bigger club, you may think of Jose Mourinho, from winning the Champions League with Porto to managing one of the biggest powerhouses in Chelsea. Martin O'Neill's successful 5-year stay at Leicester from 1995 to 2000, where he won 2 EFL Cups, to arguably the biggest club in Scottish football, winning the treble in his first season with Celtic. And David Moyes, who earned an opportunity to replace Sir Alex Ferguson in 2013 after his retirement, after stabilising Everton as a top table name within the Premier League. Less said about his stint with Manchester United the better, but it was a move which could have arguably been put on the table with merit, and not just because it was a situation of changing the Scottish Guard at Old Trafford. This is more so the case for footballers all around the world, whereas they carve a unique niche to their array of talent and showcase their strengths every 90 minutes, they earn the right to be touted to move on to bigger and better things. However, there are times when managers may bring both success and good times to a football club, which then, for me, does not ring home more than Roy Hodgson's tenure at Liverpool from the 1st of July 2010. Under the ownership of Tom Hicks and George Gillett, on the 1st of July 2010, Hodgson was appointed as manager of Liverpool, signing a 3-year contract. The appointment came against the backdrop of an unexpected candidacy bid from former Liverpool striker and manager and then club ambassador Kenny Dalglish. Dalglish's application was rejected by the club, who publicly never gave a reason for their decision, but it was suggested that he had been away from management for too long. Instead, Hodgson was chosen as the candidate that could use his extensive experience in management to steady the ship. With the club up for sale at the time, Liverpool were likely to face some turbulent times, but Hodgson's appointment met with mixed reactions from fans. There were suggestions of insufficient experience with big clubs, despite his tenure at Inter, and that he might struggle to manage big profile players. Roy Hodgson had an extensive resume on his shoulders, managing clubs from around the world, which in most cases is unheard of with England managers. These clubs include Halmstad, Malmo, Inter Milan, Udinese, and even some national teams such as Switzerland and Finland. It was during this time, in my opinion, with Fulham that he properly made a name for himself, of everyone to know his name. With some fight and grit, from claiming 9 points from his first 13 games to grabbing 12 points from the last 5 games, he steered Fulham away from potential relegation to the Championship in 2008. Some key signings came through the window the next season, such as Mark Schwarzer manning the posts, Zoltan Gira to add some spice into the midfield, Bobby Zamora and Andy Johnson joined to bolster the forward positions. All of this resulted in a 7th place finish in the Premier League and reaching the quarter-final of the FA Cup. It was in his 3rd season with Fulham that good times continued to flow, as they continued to bolster their ranks. Stephen Kelly, Damien Duff and Jonathan Greening are all with Premier League pedigree, which is most valuable, especially when you're entering European competitions. What stood this season out compared to the other two is their European run and success, which almost led to them winning the UEFA Cup title. They reached the final of the competition, and it is one thing to reach that far with a team like Fulham at the time. They beat Shakhtar Donetsk 3-2 on aggregate, who were the holders at the time. Juventus were next in line, losing 5-4 on aggregate to Fulham. The German champions Wolfsburg were no exception, as they lost 3-1 on aggregate. It was a 2-1 aggregate victory against Hamburg that sealed their position in the UEFA Cup final, at the expense of their Premier League consistency. After that season, it was reported that Hodgson was set to join Liverpool after a £2 million settlement deal with Fulham after the announcement of the departure of Rafa Benitez months prior. Thought I'd try a little bit of this sort of stuff while I'm making a YouTube channel, making a video even. So let's talk about the signings now. To kickstart the Roy Hodgson era, leaving the club included Alberto Riera to Olympiacos, Javier Mascherano to Barcelona, and Diego Cavalieri to Cesena. 3 leavers which stood out of 8 players who departed. Aside from Riera and Mascherano, a lot of the players who left were not necessarily first team players. So it gave Hodgson some breathing space into bringing some of his own players to carry out his kind of football, which essentially stood him out with Fulham. So, who did he bring in? Joe Cole was first on a free from Chelsea. Danny Wilson from Rangers for £2 million. Raul Meireles for about £11 million from Porto. Fabio Aurelio re-signed. He had a new contract where he was about to leave Liverpool, where Benitez was going to give him a pay-as-you-play contract, but Aurelio didn't want that. But then when Benitez left, Hodgson came in, signed a 2-year contract. And Brad Jones from Middlesbrough, who filled in that number 2 spot after Cavalieri left. John Joe Shelvey and Milan Jovanovic, they both joined, but that was during Benitez's time, near the end. So essentially when Hodgson came in, they joined immediately as well. So out of all these players, for me, it was Meireles who I have fond memories of, even though he only lasted 1 season. What's the point of that, you know what I mean? Him, for me, was essentially the diamond in the rough, so to speak. As I said, he only stayed for a solitary year, but I felt if he stayed, he could have been a cult hero. He could have potentially been a fan favourite. I mean, I would know. I bought a Liverpool t-shirt back in the day with his name on the back. So trust me when I say, when he left, as soon as I had his name on the back, I was not happy at all. These signings weren't only additions to the squad though, because there were 2 other players, bless their souls. Look, these signings, every single one I said, sure, they weren't the best long term, even when we know how Hodgson got on with his Liverpool career. But my goodness, at least they weren't Konchesky and Poulsen. I mean, holy gosh. Whose bright idea was it, looking at a piece of paper, looking at potential transfers and thinking, Paul Konchesky, Christian Poulsen, for a club like Liverpool? It is absurd. Look, at the end of the day, I am a fan of football. I played football when I was younger. I played a little Sunday league football in my high school years. I played it religiously in my 10s. And I've never had a sniff into trying out professional football, semi-professional football, amateur football. I've never tried anything. So I would be blessed if I right now played in the Middlesex County League. For me, football is football, and I love football, and I would play it till my legs don't work if the opportunity came to me. As a groundhopper, I pay money to watch it, and as such, I cheer when the good times are flowing. And at the same time, I'm a firm believer that if you pay to watch a game and you're allowed to cheer, you're allowed to boo. Some people might disagree with that. That's a sign that I feel is important in any game. In hindsight, I can't believe this was an idea to sign Konchesky and Poulsen. Not just a good idea or a bad idea, just an idea. Paul Konchesky was signed from Fulham for £3.5 million, and he was a Roy Hodgson player. He played majority of the games when Hodgson was in charge. Fulham, left back, helped in their UEFA Cup run. And Christian Poulsen was signed from Juventus for £4.5 million, which is crazy in a sense, but when you think about it, Juventus signed him from Sevilla for €11 million. So on paper, I wouldn't have said it was bad. 2 well-established professional footballers, one of which has a very good career in the Premier League, the other having experience in Serie A and La Liga. There was top-level pedigree there. But when I think of them both in a Liverpool shirt, it gives me goosebumps. The way they played football is like the same way you would see a stranger in a food court and deciding to eat corn on the cob the long way. However, I digress. They are both top-level footballers who have represented their countries. Whereas I said, I would feel blessed just playing in the Middlesex County League, the 7th step of English football. These players, at that time, were Liverpool players. And as such, they were signed by Liverpool for a reason. Surely it wouldn't be that bad. Liverpool season started before the start of the Premier League, as they won their European qualification matches prior to their match against Arsenal. A majority of players who played under Benitez were still pretty existent in Hodgson's first game in charge. Reina in goal, Carragher and Agger holding the centre-back positions, Mascherano and Gerrard holding the centre of the park, and Kaut being established as a winged attacker. Some new faces involved Joe Cole playing just behind Ngog and Jovanovic holding the left side wing position. With the first game set in motion, Liverpool were looking to better their 7th place finish in the previous season, and what a way to start with a win against rivals Arsenal. It was the opposite, however, in the first half, as Joe Cole received his marching orders after a rash tackle on Laurent Koscielny. In the second half, Ngog took advantage of a clever pass in the penalty box, smashing the back of the net. This was however undone with a clumsy own goal from goalkeeper Pepe Reina. The Hodgson era started with a draw at home. On game week 3, Liverpool grabbed their first win of the season with a 1-0 win against West Brom. It took another 6 weeks for them to pick up their next win. After losses against Manchester United and local rivals Everton, it didn't look good at all for the gaffer, especially after a 1-2 loss against recently promoted Blackpool. By the time they won their second game of the season, they were sitting in the relegation zone by game week 9. 3 wins followed, pushing them up to 9th place, but this would be the highest position Liverpool would be under Hodgson. His final game with Liverpool was a 3-1 loss to Blackburn, who saw themselves 3-0 down before Gerrard scored a late consolation goal. It was then, by mutual consent, that he left Liverpool on the 8th of January 2011, with the club sitting in 12th. From 20 Premier League games, Hodgson won 7, leading to a win percentage of 35%. Both losses against teams who they should be fighting with for the Premier League and teams who were looking to pick up points to move away from the relegation zone was the final straw. Hodgson may have succeeded in his tenure at Fulham, but it was an embarrassing 6 months with Liverpool. Even away from the Premier League, they were knocked out by League 2 strugglers Northampton in the League Cup. After his tenure at Liverpool, he moved to West Brom, where he helped them reach an 11th place spot, a personal best for the club. Liverpool looked to Kenny Dalglish to salvage any positivity from the season, as they mustered a 6th place finish, winning 10 of their 17 games under Dalglish. Still get nightmares over every day. So it's easy to suggest that Roy Hodgson's time as Liverpool manager really was not the best thing since sliced bread. In actual fact, it was probably past its use-by date by about a month. But at the end of the day, football, I believe, is all about meritocracy. You build yourself up to have these really big jobs or play for these massive teams because you do so well and you merit it, instead of you see things worldwide where that nepotism comes into the equation. You might know a friend where you could be part of the backroom staff or even the manager. And I personally feel at that time, I was, God, how old was I? I was 19. Wow. I was 19 years old, and I remember fondly about Roy Hodgson joining Liverpool because he did so well with Fulham. He got Fulham to a Europa League final, and where do you see that these days? Sure, you have David Moyes, who recently won the Europa Conference League with West Ham, and sure, it might not be a step up with Everton, but you can see he's actually doing really well with Everton. In hindsight, I do see why Hodgson did join Liverpool. He had at least had the opportunity to, because he was that good. You don't come into managing a Premier League team like Fulham and get them to a Europa League final and not be seen as a good, if not a great manager. There was something he had which Liverpool thought, okay, we can take a chance on him, why not? But for me, I remember the first game, it was against Arsenal, the 1-1 draw against Arsenal, and I remember I was in a pub in Ealing Broadway and looking at the telly, and just before half time actually witnessing Joe Cole getting sent off. And I don't know why, but a part of me just felt, this is it. This is what our season is going to be. It's going to be chock filled with failures to a great extent. I just still can't believe we signed Konchesky and Coulson. That's the big thing for me. Konchesky and Paulson, the fact that they were signed 14 years ago, and it still gives me proper cringe, the fact that wherever you look, whether it's on their Wikipedia or any sort of bio they have, the fact that they played for Liverpool Football Club.
All I know is pain.
And it was kind of written in the stars that he was going to fail. The players that he brought in, the losses against Northampton in the Cup, Blackpool, Blackburn, Stoke, Tottenham. We lost to Tottenham. That is like, that's a sackable offence in of itself. And had to take someone like Dalglish to spearhead Liverpool back into just contention of Europa League competitions, and over a year later winning the League Cup, which I was very proud. I celebrated that like crazy. The fact that we won a cup, it didn't matter to me if we got third or fourth. We won something, and that for me is something that I will celebrate much more than just getting a third or fourth place finish in the Premier League. I feel as though Hodgson is one of them managers. You get it a lot with players where there is a wall in front of them that they can perform only so much and look absolutely great, but then when they go past that wall, all of their weaknesses show. We've seen it now with, for example, in this case, the 2016 Euros. I believe it's the Euros. 2016 Euros. It wasn't the World Cup. 2016 Euros. And you've seen some of the tactics that he deployed with England, especially against Iceland, where the thing that just stands out for me is when Harry Kane was on corners, yet he was one of the most prolific players on the pitch in terms of aerial prowess. Hodgson is a very mediocre manager. And that isn't to say anything about him being a bad manager. There's a reason why he's a top level manager, why he's managed so many top level teams, why he's managed so many national teams. He is a really good manager, but he's a terrible manager when it comes to the big boys. Look at Inter Milan when he tried to convert Roberto Carlos into a different position. Was there a winger or something, or a winger or a centre back? As a winger. Wow, wonder where we got that from. It kind of sounds like Trent Alexander-Arnold being switched to midfield instead of a right back because Gareth Southgate doesn't trust him there. Pot kettle. And with them two things put into the equation, where he's amazing with teams that some may perceive as not winning as much as they can, and the big teams which should be winning so much that they have great big expectations to not only win games but to win trophies, you put them both together and you have a mediocre top level manager. That isn't to say that if you were to ask me, you gave me the opportunity to be a manager and you told me that I would have the exact same managerial repertoire and statistics and results as Roy Hodgson, I would give up my left leg to have something like that. Just because certain managers fail in certain roles in teams doesn't mean that they've been a complete failure all their life. Hence, the Fulham part of this video. It was extraordinary. I would hear so many of my friends talking about the Fulham one in the Europa League, and he spearheaded that. So as much as I believe he's a mediocre manager, that isn't to say that he's been a complete failure, because he succeeded so much in his managerial career. But then again, at the expense of not being as good with the big boys, he was terrible with Liverpool. The fact that when he left, Liverpool straight away loaned out Konchesky. We kept him on the books for 6 months and then immediately loaned him to Nottingham Forest. That speaks volumes. Oh my god, we actually signed Konchesky. However, still, I digress. Let me know what you think. If you feel that Hodgson is a top level manager. I mean, right now, he's probably in a care home right now because he's probably about 78 or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if he ever comes back to management. Like Neil Warnock, sometimes you can't get it out of the old dog, you know what I mean? But as always, like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you think, and I'll see you soon.